And now, for reasons that go beyond explanation, it's time for another episode of Swing Thoughts, the ironically named Mental Performance Golf Podcast. Now, wrapping up our 8th year of doing this. In a few minutes' time, we'll welcome back one of our favorite guests. I'm Golf Spiritual Leader, yeah. I don't remember when I decided I was. I just decided one day, why not? Why not take the mantle? And along with Coach Tim O'Connor, it's always great to see you, sir.
I think the universe just bequeathed that title upon you.
Okay.
It just became apparent to you that you were, and so you just accepted it.
It's so funny. That nice person I gave, was it Dave that sent me the Jones bag?
Yes, Dave Stewart.
Yeah, Dave Stewart. And one of my friends saw me playing with that Sunday bag the other day, and he said, "What does GSL stand for?" Because in my golf community, I don't really tell people I call myself that. And I said, "Well, that's." I said, "I'm Golf Spiritual Leader," and he literally did a spit take. He literally spit up his beer. He's like, "You?" I said, "Yeah, it's a joke, okay?" Anyway, it's not as funny when you have to explain it.
Yeah.
This program is baked fresh weekly and brought to you by TaylorMade Golf Canada. Recently, the Stealth Fairway Wood was, I think it's by My Golf Spy, one of the top fairway woods of the year. Try it out yourself, the new TaylorMade Stealth 2 fairway woods. And, of course, the all-new TaylorMade Stealth driver and irons. And everyone is enjoying one of their best summers of all using this product. It's like a cheat code for your game, Tim. Learn more at TaylorMadeGolf.ca.
And this program also brought to you by whoisoscarbravo.com, makers of the finest golf polo you would ever wear, made of fine Italian fabric. These shirts are so unique. That's only 100 made of each one. There's 8 different ones you can choose from. They're immaculately tailored and feel like no other golf polo, and guarantee you'll never find anyone at your club wearing it. So check out whoisoscarbravo.com.
And Stretch Lab Toronto. Now you might be this point in your golf season in need of a assisted stretch. Reduces muscle pain and joint pain, increases range of motion and flexibility, and all kinds of great stuff for your golf game at stretchlab.com. Well, that's all the time we have for this podcast. Thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate you tuning in, and join us next week when we'll have guests. That's Tim O'Connor. Welcome back to our program. Very early on, we had the privilege of meeting this gentleman who is considered by some one of the premier mental performance coaches, and has turned his love of this subject into quite an online juggernaut. You can check him out at themindfactor.net. And joining us today, along with Karl Morris, is his one of his partners in a series of books that I had the pleasure of reading, The Lost Art of Playing Golf, Lost Art of Putting, etc. Gary Nicol and Karl Morris, welcome to this program.
Thanks, Howard. Thanks, Tim. It's great to be back.
Thanks for the honor of having us on.
The honor is ours.
Exactly.
How's that?
Oh, that's true.
Gary, Karl.
It feels like a reunion now. These sessions when we get together. I've missed having the opportunity to talk about Howard's golf for a while.
Howard's golf's in a good place. Trust me, Howard is enjoying golf in a way that he's. I like talking about myself in the third person. Gary, maybe you can give us a little, because our audience is very familiar with Karl. I've lost track of the number of times we've had the pleasure of having Karl on. Maybe a little background for Gary Nicol, and then how maybe you guys came together, and what it is you guys are here together talking about today.
Sure. I'm Scottish. I was born in Scotland. I've lived most of my life here. Based at a place called Archfield Links, just outside Edinburgh, which is right next door to Renaissance and North Berwick, kind of sandwiched between the two. It's just not a bad part of the world to be living in.
Mm-hmm.
I've been a golf coach for over 30 years. I have spent half of my adult life traveling with the European tour. I think I packed a suitcase in 1995 to go out on tour, and I unpacked at the end of 2011. I'm sure I went home at some point in between these times, but I don't remember much about it. So yeah, I've been a golf coach for a long time. Karl and I have known each other for a long time. We've actually worked with some of the same players at the same time, but never in the same room or on the same range. Karl was doing his bit and I was doing my bit. So we've kind of known each other and of each other for a long time. And then a few years ago, we got together and we started doing some golf schools and clinics and various things up here at Archerfield. And then we talked for a while about, we must write a book, we must write a book. And it was just bullshit, really. But then all of a sudden, one day we started to put some ideas together and we came up with The Lost Art of Putting, mostly to kind of get our ideas down on paper before we forgot them, getting to the age that so we thought we'd best put it down. And all of a sudden we had this book, which took off and did quite nicely. And then we got the opportunity to do The Lost Art of Playing Golf and The Lost Art of the Short Game.
And those books are amazing. And what I find is really cool about those is that there's so much about playing the game and how you can improve various aspects of your game, but there's very little in what would one call technique in there. There's in your putting video, which we'll talk about expressly today, there's nothing in there about make sure you keep your head down, make sure you accelerate. What's your view on that part of how you balance technique and, say, awareness or managing your thoughts and emotions?
I think there's enough out there on technique already. I don't think we needed to add any more to that recipe. And I think the way we've kind of looked at it is these are the skills that we're discussing that aren't necessarily talked about a great deal. And I think if you almost reverse engineer how you putt, then the technique comes second almost. We ask the question, does the stroke create the putt or does the putt create the stroke? And most people would say, well, the stroke clearly creates the putt. But if you've got a 2-foot putt that's downhill left to right and a 42-foot putt that's uphill on a slow green, then the strokes are very different.
Mm-hmm.
The premise is the same, but the technique is slightly different.
And I want to get back to Gary, and because Gary, you're more of you were a golf coach coaching golf swings, and Karl is a mental performance coach coaching the mental side of the game. But Karl, I'm curious about, and this is where I wanted to get to with you eventually, but I'm curious about this. So if in all of the books, Lost Art of Putting, Golf, and the Short Game, how do you deal with a student, let's say, that maybe have some mental issues, but when you see them perform any of those activities, their technique is so flawed that you can't get to the mental side before some of those obvious mistakes or flaws or basics or what I call them, like foundationals, aren't addressed?
Yeah, I mean, clearly, I would. You've got to look at the physics and geometry of a golfer's swing and the physics and geometry of a putting stroke, and if the path is way out left or right or whatever, there is, as Gary said, there's ample directions that you can go to work on that. But what's really interesting, if we're looking at putting, is what we've found over the years is that if you take this one central theme, and I know Tim's familiar with this, well, you will be, this one central theme of attention, and really understand the importance of that and where you place your attention, and then explore what happens as a result of putting your attention in a certain place. For instance, the exercise I'm sure Tim's familiar with, Gary and myself have used it for a while because we stole it off Fred Shoemaker. That I attended his school.
We'll get it back when we finished with it. But
yeah.
That's right.
I attended Fred's school 20 odd years ago, and it was such a profound experience for me where we did the after image exercise, where you stand on a putting green and you see if you can see the image of where the ball used to be once it's gone. And there's we have guys going doing the schools who've been playing golf at a decent level for 20 odd years, and they've never actually seen this. But what's really interesting is when you get somebody to do the after image exercise, because their attention is centered in one place, it's a non-threatening place, there's no conscious direction of what they're actually trying to do. It's amazing. Me and Gary always say that we start hearing better putts. We start hearing better putts in the sense that we start noticing that the ball's coming out of the middle of the club face. the actual stroke becomes smoother. So I think for me, anybody listening, it's an exploration of where do I place my attention, and actually start to get curious about what movement emerges as a result of having your attention perhaps in some different places than the where you've spent most of your life, which is inside of your head telling your body how to move.
Yeah, I'm going to adjust this one to Gary, but segue straight off the after image exercise, which I also borrowed/stole from Fred. I use it in workshops. It's absolutely brilliant. I used to coach a university golf team, and I remember introducing it to our team, and you just, kids are exclaiming from all over the place of how putting is now, wow, this is easy. It's not so hard. But I think what I wanted to ask Gary about when we talk about, say, technique and attention, is that when you're doing something like the retinal after image exercise, by placing your attention on the ball, it frees you up. And now you get to have a direct experience, and that your technique can be developed from that experience. What's your take on that one, Gary?
Yeah, absolutely. I think from my understanding of what that does, by occupying your conscious mind, by looking for the after image or seeing the after image, it frees up your subconscious, which then allows freedom of movement. I wouldn't say I was a technical swing golf coach at all. I'm a golf coach. I teach people how to play golf, not how to swing the club.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, if anything, I was more of a shot coach than a swing coach, because I don't have a particular model that I feel that everyone has to adhere to. I'm very much of the belief that my job is to try and get the best out of the person in front of me. And if their swing is unique, as most golf swings, or all golf swings are, let's be honest, it's all about helping that player understand their tendencies and how to manage their tendencies. But it's really about, going back to what Karl said, placing their attention in a certain place. If I've got a person who's struggling with a certain shot shape, I'll just give them a task. Can you start the ball here and finish it over there? Now, if it's normally curves 30 yards from left to right, I'll try to get them to do the opposite, and somewhere in the middle they'll find some balance. And just by giving them that task, can you start it here? Can you make it curve from right to left? I don't know, I've never done that before. Okay, is it possible that might happen? That could happen? Yeah, it's definitely possible. Well, let's explore. Let's find out if that is possible. Let's see what happens.
That word possible, I think, from the conversations we've had with Karl on the show and in person, the idea of what's possible seems to permeate a lot of your philosophies, Karl, and I guess by extension, Gary, including the idea that, is it possible that this putt could go in as a beginning of the experience, as opposed to what a lot of people are fretting over when they're standing over a putt?
Yeah, I think we had a discussion about this a while ago, didn't we? When we with your game, and for me, one of the most important things is the idea that we're all just a bunch of stories, in the sense that we've all got this narrative going through our head that we construct about who we are in the world and what we do and what we're capable of and all this kind of stuff. And then there's lots of sub stories to our big story. And when we walk onto a putting green, we create even more stories about what capabilities that we have, whether we're a good putter or a poor putter. And the thing is that we don't realize that we're just making all this stuff up, that the stories are not actually real. They're just constructs inside of our head. And the great thing is with questions like, is it possible to hold this putt? Is it possible I could roll the ball into the hole? Then it actually just halts the storyline. It sends your brain in a different direction, where you get to start to create and write an updated version of the story, rather than one of, this is what I can do, and it's not my day, and I'm going to struggle on the greens, and this is a difficult putt, and all these things. And it's funny, in the last few years, I've had a bit of interesting feedback from people to just, when they go out on the golf course, is just to catch themselves and actually say to themselves, do you realize I'm making this shit up? and just actually brings them out of the fact that they're actually in the story, because when we're so deep in the story, we believe it's real.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I like about your video, and we could talk more directly about that, is that by getting ourselves out of our stories, we're in essence getting out of that mental part of the game. And so it's ironic to be talking to you, Karl. The mind factor. We talk about the mental part of the game, but I think what we're talking about is making golf more of a physical experience. That's what's real, what's happening right now, as opposed to what's in the future. I 3-putted, 2 greens on the front nine. I'm, today I suck. So I'm going to use that as a piece to go forward in terms of the physicality of it. Gary, I love how you explain in the video about reading a green from the low side, and how you really do a nice job of expanding. I think even on the book, there's more information in your video about the benefits of looking at it from the low side. So maybe I'll just allow you to just take that forward in terms of what does that do for a golfer when you have that experience of looking at it from the low side? I know that's a pretty broad question, but
it changes their perspective, essentially. When we do what we normally do, which is read a putt down the line, the first thing that does is it foreshortens the distance. So we've all seen that putt on TV where the camera's right down the line of the putt and the ball starts rolling. And it keeps rolling, and it keeps rolling, and it keeps rolling. The hole only looks 3 feet away, but the ball keeps rolling and rolling and rolling. And 4 seconds later, it either goes in or it doesn't. Then as the camera pans back out, you see that what appeared to be a 3-foot putt was actually an 8-foot putt. Now it's basically, it's depth perception, or I call it depth deception, because it's deceiving you. So when you look down the line of a putt, essentially it foreshortens it. We've all hit that shot, some more than others, where you've hit it bang on line with a flag, and from a distance you think that is so close, I'm just going to be able to tap it with my eyes closed. Then the closer you get to the green, the closer you get to your ball and the hole, the further away your ball appears to be. So that's just an example of how looking down the line foreshortens it. Plus, when we're looking down the line, we don't necessarily see any changes in elevation, any undulations on the green. But if you once you've decided, okay, let's say we've got a left to right putt, we know it's left to right because as we look at the putt down the line, the left part of the green is higher than the right, which directs us to the low side. So the key here is to stand far enough back on that low side. You've got to almost triangulate, so you become the point of the triangle. And you look at that putt, so you've got to have ball and hole and peripheral vision. Because if you can't see both ends of the putt, the start or the finish, if you miss the first 2 feet and the last 2 feet, you've not seen the full picture. So as you pan back and you look at it in 3D, HD, widescreen, you see all the putt in its true length. So in order to hit, we talk about line and pace being what determines the line. If we don't know how hard to hit the putt, how can we possibly choose a line? Now, the only way we can figure out how hard to hit the putt is to find out or establish how long it is. Is it uphill? Is it downhill? So we're looking for slopes, we're looking for distance. Every shot we hit from tee to green is about distance. Then as soon as we walk onto the green, it becomes about direction. And I think what we tend to do is we read a putt and we choose a line, then we decide how hard we're going to hit it, which is madness. If you flip that on its head, really, if pace determines line, surely we should be looking at how hard we're going to hit the putt, and then we choose a line appropriate to that pace. And what low side reading does is it allows you to just get a much better picture of what is actually happening. I talk about it to my students as, I say we're going out onto the putting green, we're going to become green reading detectives. We're going to look for clues. Most people try and hole a putt with one clue, looking at it down the line. Now, that doesn't work for many people. It certainly never worked for me. I want to try and gather as many clues as I can. I was doing this with a kid years ago and said, we're going to be green reading detectives today and we're going to look for clues. Clues are everywhere. They're lying on the ground. And he looked at me and said, no, they're not. No, I think you'll find there. I said, no, Gary, the clues are the ground. Smart arse. But he was right.
Great.
He was absolutely right. So I just think that gives you a completely different perspective and a true perspective.
Well, to me, again, that's you just, Howard, I'll let you come back in, but I just wanted to me, when you're looking at the putt from that low side, you're seeing what's there. You're not going, I think you're giving your body amazing data to go on, and the body figures it out. You don't have to go, well, this is downhill, I got to be careful, or I need to give this extra for uphill.
Yeah.
I was going to say, for people that are confused, what Gary's talking about is, once you've determined if it's a right to left putt, basically, if you can stand in the middle of the length of the putt, that gives you the triangulation. And as Gary said, so you can see the hole and the ball at the same time. I just want to make sure that people understand, like I haven't opened the link yet. I know Tim has, but for people who want to get the latest video that Karl and Gary have done, is it on the Mind Factor site yet, Karl?
It is, yeah. It's on the Mind Factor site, and it's also on Gary's site as well, Performance Principles.
And it's called the Lost Art of Putting Video Course.
Yes.
Yeah. So getting back to, which is, by the way, if you want to go to the mindfactor.net, that's where you find that, and all kinds of other products, including all the books. And I was looking at it today, Karl, man, you go back a long way. And I mean that as a compliment. You've been doing this for a long time.
It's a polite way of saying he's old, is it?
Hey, I was listening. I was listening when Karl was putting out DVDs or
that's, there AKA, you go,
aka compact discs.
So funny.
So that's back in the 90s, man.
I'll tell you what, Tim. I go so far back. The first product that we put out was a product called, it was Train Your Golf Brain. And it was actually on cassettes, where you used to put the cassette in the car.
Okay, now all we need is something. I go back so far with Karl. He was hammering this shit in stone somewhere. So here's the thing I want to talk about when it comes to putting, and I love what you said, Gary, about the pace determines the line. Beside the fact that most people aren't reading it in the way you described. I mean, once in a while, you'll see somebody can walk around 360 and go to the other side of the putt from behind the hole. But and I know you guys have. I know Karl's talked to Izzy Justice. What are your thoughts on heads up putting and how it? For some reason, when I do that in my practice, when I practice with my eyes on the target, whatever that target is, the break or the hole, my pace is always bang on. Why is that, Karl?
I think, you mentioned there Izzy Justice. I mean, he's done a lot of research on this, and he talks about the difference between taking the target and holding the target, in the sense that golf's a pretty unique sport, in the sense that most other sports, when you're trying to move an object to a target, you're looking at the target. You're looking at the hoop in basketball. You're looking at the jack in bowls, the dartboard in darts. Whereas in golf, we look at the target and then we look away from the target. And trying to hold that image can be a challenge for a lot of people. So I think, to me, I've tried it, looking at the hole, and it instinctively does make a lot of sense to me. The other thing that's really interesting, Howard, I don't know whether you've any people who've experienced this, is that you can get guys who've had real problems with the yips. But if they actually look at the hole, the instance of the yips tends to, in the majority of cases, if not completely disappear, but it certainly reduces, because there's not that anticipation of impact. So I think, who knows, in 20 years' time, everybody may hit every putt looking at the hole, but it does for me instinctively make sense from a brain-body connection. Instead of having to hold the target in your mind's eye, you're actually looking at the target.
I think one of the things that's interesting about that target piece, you go talk about going back. So when Rotella's books first started coming out, he talked about fixating on the target. It wouldn't just be, the tree behind the green. It wouldn't just be the branch. It would be a leaf. And I think that I think a lot of people were sort of taken too far in terms of need this laser type focus, which in putting, I think can really negatively affect a lot of people. And there's a lot of debate whether you should put that little line on the ball and you get down. So maybe I'll address this one to Gary. What's your position on that whole piece about the precision and using that line and say getting it lined up to your intermediate target versus say just looking at the white ball and letting it go?
Yeah, if you we get to putting in a second, but I think if you take it back to what you're talking about, the leaf on the branch in a tree, the only problem with that is I used to do that all the time. But there's one downside to that. I never hit it. So I was always disappointed because you're picking a leaf on a branch in a tree that you can barely see. It's 350 yards away. I never got that far. I never got that close. So my reaction was always negative. And I think if we apply that to putting, we've done lots of experiments with lots of different players. And when most people put this line on the ball, what they tend to see is a very thin line, an extension of that very thin line from ball to hole. Now, what that tends to do, yes, it gives you a line, but that line, we talk about the perception of difficulty there. So if you're trying to putt along a tightrope, or you're trying to putt along a razor's edge, you're probably not going to feel all that comfortable or relaxed about that prospect because all you're going to think about is don't come off the line, don't fall off the line, don't fall. Oh shit, it's falling off the line. The more you think about trying to keep it on that very thin line, your attention then comes back to you and what you need to do and what you need to do with the putter, away from what the object of the task is to get the ball into the hole. So we talk about putting down a channel rather than a line. And I had a couple of people in for putting sessions this morning, and the analogy I used was, okay, so you go to the supermarket Saturday afternoon, and there are the parking spaces all blocked off by white lines. They're all defined by white lines. But it's Saturday afternoon, it's really busy. There's only one space left in the car park, and it's between a Ferrari and a Bentley. Do you drive your car in at great speeds with no care for the outcome? Or do you go in there thinking, shit, don't hit the Ferrari, don't hit the Bentley, don't hit the Ferrari, don't hit the Bentley? You take these cars out of the equation, the parking space is still exactly the same size.
There you
but
go.
you just drive straight in.
I knew you guys were, pretty successful, but where
Yeah.
the hell are you guys shopping that there's Bentleys and Ferraris at the grocery store? But that's another.
You don't have them in Canada?
I knew you guys were selling some books.
Not where I
but
buy
wait a
my
minute.
groceries.
We only shop at Harrods, Howard. That's the thing.
Jesus, Gary, slow down there, son. I listened to. I just happened to be on Karl's podcast yesterday, and I had read the book from Susie Myers, Golf from Point A. And if you've read the book or you know who Susie is, I recommend this podcast because it's great. Karl, she's such an engaging speaker, and she's got lots to say. But there was a point in the conversation that I kind of wanted to throw to you two guys. And you were talking to her about, she was saying things like, there is nothing really new in her thinking. It's just that there's she's grown into her philosophy, and then it's just basically saying not the same thing to students because that's what she truly believes. So I guess what I'm trying to get at for both of you, Gary and Karl, is all these years now into teaching and coaching, is there anything new or just new ways of saying the things that you two have come to believe are important in both aspects of the game?
If I can have a go at that one first.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
He's still trying to park between a Bentley and a Ferrari, so let him alone for a second.
He's just hit the Bentley.
And you should have tried to reverse him.
My take on it is that I think the pandemic was clearly a tough time for everybody, but I think the pandemic, what had allowed myself included, it gave us an inordinate amount of time to look at stuff. And my goodness, is there a lot of stuff out there now? There's so much information about so many things, and I've fallen into the trap of going down that rabbit hole of, you get a guest on the podcast and oh, that's a great direction to go, and this is a great direction to go. And I do think, you mentioned Susie and her philosophy, and I really admire her in many ways for that I think everybody in the end needs to develop their own philosophy as a coach or as a player of this is what I believe to be true in this current time, and this is what I aim to deliver, because my experience suggests this is the best way forward. Now, does that philosophy have to stay set in stone forever? No, for most people it evolves. But I think the epidemic that we're all suffering with at the moment is just a bombardment and an overload of information. I think back to, we mentioned Fred. I always mention Fred generally on the show, and I know Tim, you guys mention him a lot. He was a big influence on me. But I think back to my first experience of Fred. I read his book, but I didn't know anything else about him. And I had to get on a plane. I had to fly from Manchester to London, across to San Francisco, and drive down to Carmel to see him. I had to go out and seek that information. I couldn't just press on a YouTube video that said, oh, Fred Shoemaker, The Art of Practicing, or whatever, or listen to a podcast. And I think in many ways, perhaps we're perpetuating it here with what we're doing, but I think in many ways, information has been devalued to the detriment of actual experience. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where being able to spend time with a coach or a mentor or whatever, where you can actually sift through all of this stuff. I'm get Gary's take on this in a second, but I've said to a number of people, if I look at my coaching experience over 30 years, if I look at the early days, generally a lot of people would come to you and they perhaps wouldn't know that much about the game. You kind of have to fill the cup up, if you like. Now, virtually everybody that comes to see me, it's kind of like, my God, where do I start with this guy? Because he's got so much stuff in his head. He's done decade, he's done this, he's done that. He's heard about grain reaction forces, isn't it? And we're just in danger of overloading our brains. And I think that's why things like the after image is such a breath of fresh air, because it's such a simple exercise. And we get back to an essence whereby the mind is quieter and actually allows the body to do what it's been proven to be capable of doing over millions of years, which is using tools and moving objects to targets. That's the rant over with now.
Well, no, Gary. So Gary, what is your thought on that?
I was going to say that.
Well, thanks for being on the show, boys. Always a pleasure catching up with you.
I'll give you an example. I worked with a guy on and off for years, a guy called Phil Price, and I plays the seniors tour over here. You might remember him from when he beat Phil Mickelson in the 2002 Ryder Cup singles. Mm-hmm. Price is a great lad, been a friend for a long, long time. And I worked with him on and off for years, and he never once asked for a lesson. He never once asked for coaching. He would phone me up and say, are you going to be at such and such a tournament next week? You're going to be in whatever. Yeah. I said, okay. I need a mental declutter. That was it. That was my job, was to strip all the shit away that was going on in his head and give him something to work on, something to focus on. So I was doing this 20 years ago, and I didn't even know I was doing it. Mm-hmm. I was trying to strip things back and remove all the unnecessary noise. But I realized, I thought it was just, if someone's got one thing to work on, they should be able to achieve something. But it's when we got all this other noise and all this other information, then we get confused. Well,
I think what Karl said about the mental side and people being inundated with so much information, I think it applies to golf swings as well, because, when I first met a friend of ours, Mark Evershed, 30 years ago, he was one of the first few people that I met that had a real sort of a quirky take on the golf swing, and he'd been in the golf machine world and all this stuff. Well, now, as you said, Karl and Gary, everybody can come to a lesson with so much information that wasn't available before. But in the end, all the things about a golf swing that were true when we all started as kids are still true today.
Yes.
And one of the things is that I noticed that, whether it's going back to things like the golf machine or Rotella or whatever, or Fred Shoemaker, is that basically we cobble together all this stuff. We're all influenced by somebody. And like I say, I've said about in terms of music, the metaphor I use, there's only 3 chords in rock and roll, but how do you put it together your way? And I think that's what you guys have done really nicely in terms of, like, you're drafting off your own experience through this. You're just not, you may have been introduced by the retinal after image by Fred, but in your video, Karl, you've thrown some new things in there that I haven't heard. I love how you invite people to, when they go to the practice green, rather than throw the 3 balls down and try and hit the same 3 putts over and over again, do the retinal after image, and it gets you centered, it grounds you, it kind of quiets the mind. So that's what I like about your video. You guys have put your own nice little personal touches on it.
That video we're talking about is called The Lost Art of Putting Program. It's at themindfactor.net, as is all the other various programs that are well worth your time, effort, and money. I just so you know, Karl, coming on this program pays dividends because one of our listeners, I won't say who it is, he's signed up for your fall program. I'm not sure he wants to become a coach, but he's a guy that coaches executives. He's a very keen golfer and heard you on the show and has signed up, and you'll meet him in I think in your city in the fall.
Wow, he's going to come over from Canada.
Yeah, well, we can go places too, Karl. Okay,
Howard, are you looking for Are you looking for a 5% commission on that?
I'm not looking for anything but Karl's continuous ability or willingness to come on the show. But I guess if he bails, we got Gary now, because it looks like to me Gary will do anything.
Hey, Scott, it's our work cheap.
Hey, listen, Gary Nicol and Karl Morris, congratulations on another great program. Go check out the Lost Art series of books. And now the Lost Art of Putting program video. Thanks, guys. Karl. And by the way, that Susie Meyer's podcast is just a couple weeks old, and I love her stuff. And if you do too, Golf from Point A is her book. And she talks about it. Very, very well done, Carly.
No, she's great. I think you only have to listen to her for a few minutes, and the enthusiasm that she has for the game
she's great.
Is really infectious. Yeah, she's brilliant.
Thanks, Karl Morris. Thanks, Gary Nicol.
Take care,
My
guys.
pleasure. Can I just say one more thing just before we leave?
Go
For all
for it.
your listeners out there, if you want to go to either the Mind Factor or performanceprinciples.co.uk to download the program, we can offer your listeners a 20% discount if you just key in the code TLA20, where TLA for the Lost Art, 20 TLA20, where it says, do you have a coupon? Click on that and you get a 20% discount.
That's
Wow,
very kind of you.
Kind of you. Thank you.
And maybe we'll include that in our show notes for people if they're going to be able to go and check this out. Thanks again, guys. The Lost Art of Putting program, well worth your time and effort and money. Thanks, Ken. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Howard. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Howard. Thanks, Tim.
again.
Just let yourself out, you know. We're going to continue. What we do now is, when you listen to the show, what we do now is you guys leave and then we talk about you. It's really fun.
I know, we've heard it before.
All right. Just relax. It'll all be good. I promise.
They know our deal. Oh my God.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks again.
Thanks,
Okay,
fellas. Bye.
No. So I went back and looked at our emails. So I saw that. I've just been busy the last couple of weeks. And I saw that you had sent me the link to the video. And I just saw it now. And obviously it was easy enough to download all that stuff. And you had no problem with it?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Okay.
It took me a while to figure it. It took me a few minutes to figure it out because you get a bunch of emails and it's anyway.
And don't you have to put in a password? You whatever.
You put in that code he talked about.
No, I know, but there's also a point here I wanted to show it to you when we're done, where it's asking me for a password. I don't have a password for that site.
You just have to create your own.
Okay.
It's like any other thing that you sign up for. You got to put in your username and stuff. So
Well, listen,
I can guide.
so what
I know
did you-
this technology stuff's new for you, and
No.
you
I
are
know,
the
no.
GSL, but I can
am.
help you through it.
So, what did you think of the video?
I thought it was really, really good. They have taken a lot of the stuff that was in the book, The Lost Art of Putting, and just expanded it. And that's what I really liked about, for instance, the reading a green from the low side. There's a ton of information that Gary gives in the video that's not in the book. So
good.
it really does nicely expand. Are we keeping you up late?
No. I've been yawning the last couple of days. For some reason, I'm not getting enough sleep. But go ahead. I'm fascinated.
So in the video, there's more information. So if you already possess the Lost Art of Putting book, I would say the video is very much worth your while.
Okay.
And Karl does a really nice job. Karl's a great presenter. That's one of the things I go back to the 90s when I was like listening so keenly to his compact discs. he just has a great way of explaining things, and I love their approach to the game, to putting, about things like asking good questions, being present where you're placing your attention, and so I think it's a really valuable resource.
I was going to ask you that too, because I've read all the books, Lost Art of Putting, Short Game, and Golf, and you answered that question. What's in there that isn't in the books? So that's good. I'm looking. Well, now that I know I have access to it, I'm going to go check it out. And as I said, I listened to Karl's entire podcast with Susie Myers, and she's great. We don't ask him. I'm not sure we've ever asked him, but I think we should ask him for her contact information, because she'd be great on our show.
I tried to get in contact with her once, but anyways, I didn't get a response. So I'll try again. I'll say, hey, we're friends of Karl Morris.
Yeah, we're friends of Karl. And also listening to her with him, I thought, she'd be great with us, because, we're a different vibe. We're a little more casual.
Yes.
Also, Kent Osborne, as I mentioned off the top, he is Karl's latest guest.
Yeah.
I laugh sometimes because I feel like, because I'm the one that I think we were the very first podcast to get Kent on the show. And now he's off and running. Now he's flitting about to everybody's podcasts.
Well, what's interesting is that, flitting, very nice.
Yeah, he flits.
He flits.
He's a flitterer.
So I think there's part of Kent in the putting video, because what I was saying, that they've kind of cobbled together a bunch of different people like Izzy Justice, Fred Shoemaker, and I think there's a bit of Kent Osborne in there, because I think it's the second chapter, if you will, of the video. It's gratitude, and our buddy Kent is huge on gratitude.
Well, that's actually the name of the head of the show note on Karl's last podcast is all about gratitude.
Yeah, so I think he's drafted off of Kent in a big way.
Here's another thing that's a tie-in to Kent and Izzy Justice is Kent, as you may or may not remember, putts completely looking at the hole.
Oh, yeah. Well, I want to tell a quick story connected to the, where you're looking and the line on the ball. So it was about 2 years ago. I was playing on a men's night during COVID, so not as many people. I'm playing with this really nice fellow. He'd only taken up the game about 3 or 4 years before. Quick learner, good athlete. And on the greens, he was one of those guys who putted with the line. However, he obviously didn't know the definition of insanity because he would, despite the fixating on the line, and he would 3 and sometimes 4 putt. And, we're just playing. There's nobody behind us, no one in front. So I didn't bother him, but he ends up signing up with me to play because we had a nice time. He ends up signing to play with me. Well, I'm playing with the men's vice captain and the treasurer. Well, with his fixations on the line, we get to the 10th tee, and Frank goes, "Gentlemen, 2 hours and 45 minutes to play the front 9. Unacceptable."
That's great.
And the poor guy, he's just like, oh, okay. So we get to the 12th green, and the guy has, the WD. You see like a tour pro shoots a 78 on the first day. Oh, my back. Well, that's what this guy pulls. Oh, my back. So I'm right. So that's a long way of saying I'm concur heartily with don't get. I know that Ralph Bauer is a big guy on the line on the ball, and there's lots of people who are on that. But
yeah,
I just think for the average person, and I think good players too, it just, as Gary was saying, it just causes a bit more tension, and you have to be right on that tightrope line. And I just think that anything that ties you up versus frees you up is not so swell.
Well, for a long time, I did put a line in my ball, but I think for better players that practice a lot and can get the ball to go end over end over end, there's very few guys on tour that don't have a line or an alignment type of something on their ball. Whether it's, by the way, if you are looking for one, all what you said aside, not that it wasn't, well and apt, but TaylorMade makes these balls now.
Yeah, they're cool.
And I played with somebody recently that was using it, and I was like, oh yeah, I've seen those.
That's the tour response ball, right?
I think it's a TPF F5X, but they put the lines on them in different colors, which I think, and it's the thing I like about them it's not just this exact line, this thin line. What it is it's a line down the middle, and then two shaded thick lines on either side of that. The point being, it takes away some of the precisionness. That's not a word. I know that. It takes away some of the precision of trying to roll it so precisely down it gives what Karl was saying. It gives more of a channel.
Exactly. And I love what you said there about the difference. So it's the tour response. It's known as the TaylorMade Tour Response Stripe golf ball.
Oh, okay.
And
so it's not the TP5X. Okay.
No, it has a really wide band on it. So
Well, that's what I was saying.
I love the point you're making is that to me would help a golfer be less tied up with.
Well, what it does, and again, I think this is a Karl Morris thing too, that Karl talked about seeing this, and not just on our show today, but in one of the books, where he talks about seeing this channel, the size of the golf ball. So what these TaylorMade Tour Response balls give you is a channel as wide as the ball is. Plus, now the guy I was playing with had it, I think it was yellow, I'm not sure. But I looked online and they're in a bunch of different colors. And just for fun one day, I'm going to try it. Just because I don't put a line on my ball now, but even when I did, I only would use the line on sort of the makeable range. Sort of, I don't know, not always inside 50, but like sort of 10, 12, 8, 6. Mm-hmm. I found the closer I got to the hole, the better it was for me. When I had longer putts, even when my ball had a line on it, I never used it. Now I don't use it at all. I don't use it for short putts. I don't use it for long putts. I just somehow got away from it, probably because of what your story illustrated, is you can get really too wrapped up in making sure that line is precise. And I think you said it best at the end there, that it does produce, as Gary said, a little bit of extra stress in that, is this line correct?
Yeah. And even to the point, I think where people are like watching the putter head go back and instead of just freeing it up. So, yeah.
Well, that's a great thing there. Karl Morris, Gary Nicol, and the Lost Art of Putting videos. Tim O'Connor, I believe is your name. Thanks for your participation. This is episode 241.
Wow.
And I won't be able to play. I won't be able to play next week. I won't be able to do this next week.
We won't be able to tee it up next week.
We won't be able to tee it up. And I've got to. So we'll be back, and our regular season is almost over. And we'll be back to doing it every couple of weeks come September. I did want to tell you though that I got asked to, and by the time we do another podcast, I'll have had this experience. I got asked to host the Ben Kern Pro-Am this year.
Oh wow, that's so cool!
Yeah, very cool at the National, and I'm not playing in it. Because it's a very, it's expensive, and they got a lot of people. They raise a lot of money.
Oh,
Ben Kern was a friend of ours, died way too young of skin cancer,
lung cancer, but it doesn't matter.
Was it lung? But didn't it start
cancer.
with skin cancer?
Don't know. It doesn't matter. But
Well, here's how I know.
Yeah.
Here's the only thing I remember when Ben had a tag taken off his face, so that melanoma became lung cancer.
Oh.
Whatever it was, he's gone too early, and I got asked to host it, and I'm hosting it with Steve Elkington and Rocco Mediate.
Oh wow, that'll be
I'll have
cool.
some stories. Maybe what I was going to ask. I'm going to see like if I get to meet him, because I'm going to spend a few hours with these guys, and I was going to. I'll take Rocco's temperature in terms of coming on the show.
And Elk too. I mean, both of those
Would be
guys.
great.
Both of those guys are great, and they both are what one would call forthright. They're not shrinking violets.
The thing is, I know a guy I got a little bit of an in with Elkington because I know a guy that knows him. So I'm going to bring up that guy's name because I've had a chance to talk to Elkington before through this dude. So that might be an easier
Yeah,
guess.
that'd
Sure,
be
Rob.
awesome.
Yeah.
I remember Elk. I know you got to go, but I remember Elk, as they called him on tour. He had a really nice, I think it was a YouTube series. I think it was called Digging Out of the Dirt or something.
Yes.
It was really, really good.
Well, that's how I know him, because the guy that produced that series asked me to come in and consult, and I had a couple of conversations with Elkington about, it doesn't matter, but I never got involved with him, but I know the guy that did that series, and maybe we could get Elkington on the show.
Well, cool.
So there you
Interesting
go.
How everything kind of
It all turns around.
intersects in this universe of ours. That's why you're the GSL. You make magic happen.
O'ConnorGolf.ca is how you get a hold of Tim. His Substack is...
TO'Connor.substack.com.
And of course, the Humble and Fred Show continues to rack up some Hall of Fame numbers. Thanks, everybody. Thanks to TaylorMade Golf, TaylorMadeGolf.ca. Who is Oscar Bravo? Stretch Lab Toronto. And thank you for supporting us. We certainly appreciate it. See you in a couple of weeks.
You feel alright when you hear the music ring.
That was great.